body hit the water like a stone. Arms lashed tight behind her back, ankles bound with coarse rope. Arya Monroe plunged into the 20-meter training pool and vanished beneath the surface. Dead weight. Sergeant Blake Core barked from the edge, his voice cutting across the desert yard. This is where the weak learn the truth. Hey soldiers, sound off. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe and stay locked in for the missions ahead. The recruits erupted in laughter. Some leaned forward, hungry for panic, the flailing, the thrashing, the desperate gasps that always came when someone was hurled in bound like an animal. Drown-proofing day at Fort Arclight Naval Facility had broken Olympic swimmers and endurance athletes alike. To them, Arya would be no different. She had heard their whispers for weeks, that she didn't belong, that she was wasting a slot meant for someone stronger, harder, male, her uniform too crisp, her posture too rigid, her silence mistaken for fear. She wore invisibility like armor, but invisibility couldn't keep her afloat. Core's boots scraped against the concrete as he paced. He didn't offer instructions, there weren't any. The drill was simple: survive, or be dragged out limp, and from the smirk carved into his scarred face, he had already decided Arya would fail. 10 seconds, a recruit muttered. The others chuckled. Nevada sun blazed down, reflecting cruelly off the water's surface, as if the sky itself was waiting for her to break. But below, Arya's world was quiet. Cold pressure wrapped her chest, pulling her back to a memory she rarely let surface. Montana, age 12, a swollen river, current ripping the breath from her lungs, boys laughing on the bank. She had almost drowned then. Until her father's voice returned, panic kills faster than water. She opened her eyes, bubbles slipping free in a thin stream. This was no different. Chin tucked, ankles flexed against the rope, lungs burning, but her heartbeat stayed steady. Above, the laughter faltered. The recruits expected chaos instead. The surface stayed unnervingly calm. "Where is she?" one whispered. Core folded his arms. "She's done," he muttered, though his tone lacked conviction. At the far end of the deck, Captain Elias Rain raised his rugged tablet, stylus moving in deliberate strokes. He wasn't watching for panic. He was measuring something else entirely. The seconds stretched, every head turning toward the pool, every sneer starting to tighten into unease. The pool glittered like glass under the Nevada sun. The laughter that had greeted her fall had thinned into something sharper, nervous, brittle. A dozen recruits leaned forward, their shadows falling over the water's edge. Waiting for panic? It didn't come. Sergeant Blake Core forced a smirk, arms folded across his chest. But the twitch at his jaw betrayed him. Dead weight, he told himself. The pool always did the dirty work. At the far end, Captain Elias Rain stood silent. His rugged tablet glowed faintly in the glare, stylus scratching in neat strokes. The stopwatch on his other wrist ticked with the kind of patience only he seemed to possess. He wasn't recording failure. He was recording time, beneath. Arya's world narrowed to pressure and rhythm. Cold squeezed her chest, but her mind was steady, counting heartbeats instead of seconds. Bob, sip, sink. A single breath stolen at the surface. Then she vanished again without splash or struggle. Panic killed faster than water. Up above, recruits shifted uneasily. The surface was too calm. "Where the hell is she?" and whispered. Another chuckled weakly. "She's done." But the words didn't carry. The stillness stretched like a wire ready to snap. At the bottom, Arya bent her knees, ankles grinding against the coarse rope. The knot was a double wrap, looped over itself. To most, it was ironclad, a prison that only tightened with struggle. But Arya knew better. If the outer loop slipped, it would leave a gap, not freedom, not yet, but a crack. A crack was everything. She pressed her ankles tight, flexing, twisting, toes clawed back, heels forced outward, micro movements controlled, precise applied force at the knot's weakest angle. Rope bit into her skin. Pain flared. The burn of flesh tearing was confirmation the fibers were moving. Above. Kor's smirk wavered. He'd seen drown-proofing break Olympic swimmers. Triathletes, hardened operators, they always thrashed, always betrayed themselves. But here the pool stayed silent, unbroken. Even the desert wind seemed to pause. Then it happened. A shudder through the rope. Arya felt it more than saw it. The outer loop slipped a notch. Pressure eased, uneven now. A gap, a door cracked open in the dark. Her lungs roared for air, but she dragged her ankles closer to her bound hands. Fingers scraped blind across rough fiber, knuckles shredding. At first, only her fingertips hooked. She bobbed up, stole a sip of air, sank again. Next cycle, a knuckle wedged in, another breath, another dive. This time her whole hand drove deep into the gap. Twisting, prying with raw determination, blood feathered into the water. But she didn't stop. Rope groaned, then snap shift. The outer loop tore loose, one leg kicked free. Gasps ripped through the line of recruits. No way. Someone hissed. Another cursed under his breath. Kor's arms dropped to his sides, face paling. Rain's stylus paused mid-stroke, his jaw tight. Arya didn't waste the victory. She curled, drove diagonally for the edge. Her free foot hooked a submerged ladder rung. Anchoring her body, hips, chest, and shoulders slammed against the wall. With a violent roll, she spilled out of the pool, collapsing onto the blistering deck. Water poured off her uniform in silver sheets. Wrists still bound tight behind her back. One ankle still tethered. But she was breathing steady, deliberate. She had pulled herself out, alone. Silence weighed heavier than the desert heat. Every recruit stared, their earlier laughter hanging in memory like a ghost they wanted to deny. They had expected thrashing, a limp body dragged out by safety divers. Instead, they had watched someone dismantle the impossible, breath by breath. On her next rise, half kneeling, soaked. Eyes hard, Arya scanned them. She saw their faces shift, sneers turn to unease. Confidence hollowed into doubt. Kor took a step forward, fists clenched. But the words died on his tongue. He had no explanation for what they'd just seen. At the far end, Rain finally moved. He leaned toward his comms mic, voice low and clinical. A verdict rather than an observation nightshade marker observed. Protocol pending confirmation. Nobody else heard him. But they saw her. And in that silence, every man on the deck realized what terrified them most. It wasn't that she had survived what should have drowned her. It was that she had done it with control, with precision like someone who had been here before. And she clearly wasn't finished yet. Arya burst from the water like a missile, her bound arms still pinned behind her back, but her legs free, driving her upward with explosive force. She landed chest first against the pool wall, pressed her boots to the tile, and used the momentum to vault herself clear of the water. She stood dripping on the deck, rope dangling from one ankle, face expressionless, sunlight carved down across her shoulders, turning the sheen of water into steel. The formation of recruits froze. For weeks they had laughed, mocked, dismissed her. Now she stood silent, breathing steady, as if she had just completed a warm-up drill instead of one of the most punishing evolutions in special operations training. Sergeant Blake Kor's mouth opened, but no words came out. He had seen drown-proofing survive tests before, but never like this. Never with such precision, never with such control. And then she did something none of them expected. Arya bent forward, arms still trussed tight, and calmly rolled her shoulders until the rope snapped against her hip. The fibers split with a muffled crack. She brought her hands forward, shook free of the wet cord, and let it drop at her feet. The sound of it hitting the concrete was louder than a gunshot. Gasps broke through the ranks. One recruit whispered, "Impossible," another muttered, "Nobody does that." Captain Elias Rain didn't look surprised. He stepped forward, boots deliberate against the deck, tablet in one hand. His voice was sharp, official, leaving no room for doubt. Nightshade protocol verified. The recruits stared at him in confusion. The words meant nothing to them, but the weight of his tone, the precision of his salute, made the message clear. He wasn't addressing a recruit. He was addressing someone above his rank. Arya returned his gaze, eyes hard as stone. For the first time in weeks, her posture shifted. The rigid awkwardness melted away. Shoulders squared, chin high. The presence of command radiated from her like heat from the desert asphalt. Rain snapped to attention and saluted. Major Monroe, evaluation complete. The yard erupted in whispers. Major, the recruit they had ridiculed, dismissed as weak, was their superior officer all along. Kor staggered forward, face twisted with rage. This is a damn setup. She provoked me. She cheated this drill. Arya turned her head slowly, eyes cutting into him with surgical precision. Her voice was low, calm, lethal. If weakness is enough to provoke abuse, Sergeant, then you were unfit to lead before you ever opened your mouth. Kor froze, his fury breaking against the iron edge of her words. Rain's tone snapped like a rifle shot. Sergeant Blake Kor, effective immediately. You are suspended from all training authority. Report to command headquarters, now! The order landed heavy, stripping away the last of Kor's swagger. He hesitated, jaw clenched, then shoved past Arya toward the exit, spitting dust as he went, but not before she leaned close enough for only him to hear. It ended the moment you mistook cruelty for strength. His steps faltered. He didn't look back. The recruits stood rigid, unsure if they should salute, speak, or simply vanish into the desert air. Their world had been flipped in a single afternoon. Arya let her eyes sweep across the formation, no longer blank, no longer empty. Every glance pinned someone in place, reminding them of every laugh, every jeer, every whisper when they thought no one important was listening. She said nothing more. The silence was more powerful than any speech. Rain turned toward the stunned assembly. His voice cracked like thunder. Attention! You are in the presence of Major Arya Monroe, decorated combat operative, former Ghost Program officer, and your new commanding officer. You will treat her as such. The words detonated across the yard. Some recruits flinched, others stared, pale and speechless. A handful straightened instinctively, recognizing authority when it stood in front of them. Arya let the weight of revelation settle. Every second of humiliation, every whispered insult, had been part of the test, and now the true evaluation was about to begin, because survival was never the final measure. Character was. She stepped forward, water dripping onto the parched concrete, and locked eyes with the formation. I've watched you for 18 days, she said, her voice steady, each syllable sharp as a blade. Not your push-ups, not your ruck times, your character. How you treat those you thought powerless. Gasps rippled through the line. Faces paled as the realization cut in. Their real test hadn't been obstacle courses or forced marches. It had been her, and before anyone could move. She raised a hand, pointing at 3 recruits. You, and you. The chosen froze, unsure why. The others held their breath. Rain made another note on his tablet. Lips pressed into a thin line. He knew exactly what was coming next. So did Arya. The drill was over. The true reckoning had just begun. The recruits stood frozen, the desert wind tugging at their uniforms as if even the air refused to break the silence. Arya Monroe let the moment stretch, each second pressing down like weight training their backs could never prepare for. Then she stepped forward, boots whispering against the sun-baked concrete. I didn't come here to see how many miles you could run, she said, voice cutting sharp through the yard. I came to see who you are when you think no one who matters is watching. Eyes flickered across the ranks. Some hardened in defiance. Others dropped to the ground in shame. Everyone remembered their own laughter, the way they had turned their faces when she fell, when they thought she was too weak to rise. Arya's gaze locked on the 3 recruits she had singled out. Corporal Jace Renner, who had shared his rations with a teammate when no one else would. Specialist Hannah Lee, who had quietly defended another recruit during a late-night march. Private Miguel Torres, who had put the team's success over his own during a navigation exercise. "You 3 showed the qualities special operations actually demands," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "Courage without recognition, loyalty without reward, leadership without needing a title." The rest of the formation shifted uncomfortably. Dust kicked under boots. For the first time, they began to understand this wasn't about being fastest or strongest. It was about who could carry power without abusing it. Arya crouched slowly, fingers digging into the dirt. She lifted a handful, dry earth sifting between her knuckles, scattering like ash in the hot wind. Every eye followed the grains until nothing remained in her palm. "The ground doesn't care who you are," she said. "Doesn't care where you came from, or what name is stitched on your uniform. The ground only asks one question when they throw you down. Will you rise?" The words settled heavy. Recruits shifted, the shame of their laughter now etched into their posture. A few swallowed hard, the lesson cutting deeper than any blade or bullet. Arya straightened, brushing her palms together. "Most of you failed that test, and that's not punishment, it's a direction. Some of you will serve elsewhere, and maybe someday you'll learn what true strength means. But the ones who remain," she turned back to the 3, "will begin training under me, and I will push you harder than Sergeant Core ever dreamed. But I will never humiliate you to prove my power, because power that needs to break others to exist is weakness." Captain Rain closed his tablet, nodding once. The evaluation was complete, but the transformation had only begun. Arya scanned the faces one last time. Sunlight gleamed off her combat decorations, water still dripping from her uniform. But it was her presence the authority earned, not demanded, that filled the yard. "You want to know the difference between cruelty and leadership?" she asked quietly. "Cruelty breaks people down to make itself feel taller. Leadership builds people up until they discover they can stand taller than they ever imagined." Silence. Then, slowly, one recruit at the far end shifted to attention. Another followed. Within moments, the entire formation snapped upright, not in fear, not in shame, but in respect. For the first time, they weren't looking at a weak recruit. They were looking at a leader. Arya let the silence linger, then turned to Rain. "Dismiss them," as the formation broke apart. Her words still hung in the hot Nevada air, heavy enough to outlast the day. True strength isn't proven by how many you can break. It's proven by how many you refuse to let fall.